Hi everyone, I'm Dexter, 33, a software developer from Boston who grew up with controlling parents who always favored my sister. When a dream job opened up in Madrid, I jumped at the chance, selling my house before leaving. I thought I'd tied up all loose ends until I got a frantic call from my sister while enjoying tapas at a local restaurant. Somehow my parents had given her the keys to my house, a house that now belonged to someone else. Before I tell you how my sister ended up in a stranger's house, hit like and subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts wasn't exactly the idyllic childhood you see in movies. My parents made it clear from early on that there was a hierarchy in our family, and I wasn't at the top. My sister Amanda, who's 28 now, was always the golden child. Everything she did was celebrated like she'd just discovered the cure for cancer, while my achievements barely registered on their radar. When Amanda made the swim team in middle school, my parents threw a party and invited the entire extended family. When I was accepted into the robotics club and won a regional competition, they asked if that would interfere with my lawn mowing schedule. That pretty much sums up my childhood. The disparity became even more obvious as we entered high school. Amanda got a car for her 16th birthday, a brand new Honda Civic with all the bells and whistles. When my 16th birthday rolled around, my dad handed me a bus schedule and told me that independence meant figuring things out for myself. I ended up saving for 2 years, working at a local grocery store after school and on weekends to buy a beaten-up Ford that broke down every other week. College was where the difference in treatment became impossible to ignore. My parents paid Amanda's full tuition at a private university, covered her apartment, and gave her a generous monthly allowance. They sat me down before senior year of high school and explained that they couldn't afford to help with college because they were saving for Amanda's graduate school. I remember my mother saying, "You're smart and resourceful, Dexter. You'll figure it out." And figure it out I did. I worked 3 jobs while maintaining a full course load at the state university. I was a teaching assistant in the computer science department, stocked shelves overnight at a 24-hour supermarket, and did freelance web development on the side. I graduated with honors and minimal debt entirely through my own efforts. My career in software development took off faster than I expected. I landed a good position at a tech company right out of college and climbed the ladder steadily. By the time I was 30, I had saved enough for a down payment on a modest house in a nice neighborhood outside Boston, a 3-bedroom colonial with a small yard and a front porch where I could drink my morning coffee. Buying that house was a major milestone for me. It represented everything I had worked for: stability, independence, and proof that I could succeed without my parents' help. When I called to tell them about it, my father's first question was whether I'd gotten a good interest rate. My mother wondered aloud if it wasn't too much house for just one person. Amanda, who was present during the call, immediately asked when she could come stay for an extended visit. Despite the obvious favoritism and years of feeling like a second-class citizen in my own family, I never completely cut ties. I reduced contact to holiday gatherings and occasional phone calls, always keeping conversations light and avoiding any topics that might lead to confrontation. I told myself this was maturity, but looking back, I was still seeking approval I would never receive. The family dynamic shifted about 8 months ago when Amanda's marriage fell apart. Her husband, a pharmaceutical sales rep she'd met in college, left her for his coworker. Amanda, who had never held a full-time job, suddenly found herself without the comfortable lifestyle she was accustomed to. Predictably, she moved back in with our parents, who welcomed her with open arms and converted their home office into a temporary bedroom for her. That's when the pressure on me intensified. My mother started calling weekly with thinly veiled suggestions about how I could help Amanda get back on her feet. My father was more direct, asking if I could loan Amanda money for a fresh start. Neither of them seemed to consider that Amanda might need to take responsibility for her own life, for once. "Your sister is going through a very difficult time," my mother would say, her voice dropping to that guilt-inducing whisper she'd perfected over the years. Family helps family, Dexter. I maintained my boundaries while trying to stay civil. I offered to help Amanda update her resume and used some industry connections to get her interviews for entry-level positions. I even suggested she could stay with me for a week or 2 while apartment hunting. but I made it clear that I wouldn't be her financial safety net. This stance was met with cold disappointment from my parents and passive-aggressive texts from Amanda about how some people don't understand the meaning of family. The tension was building, but I was managing it. Then came the job offer that would change everything. The email from Tech Fusion International arrived on a Tuesday morning in early spring. At first I thought it was spam. An international tech company headquartered in Madrid wanted to interview me for a senior developer position. It seemed too good to be true. But after some research and a few preliminary calls, I realized this was legitimate and potentially life-changing. Tech Fusion was expanding their artificial intelligence division and had come across some open-source code I'd contributed to GitHub. They were impressed with my problem-solving approach and wanted someone with my skill set to join their team. The position offered a substantial salary increase, comprehensive benefits, and most enticingly, the chance to live in Spain for at least 2 years. My initial reaction wasn't immediate excitement. Instead, I felt a familiar weight of family obligation holding me back. What would my parents expect of me? If I moved overseas, would they guilt me about abandoning Amanda during her time of need? Would moving thousands of miles away finally make me the official black sheep of the family? I called my best friend Tyler that evening, pacing around my kitchen as I explained the offer and my reservations. "Are you seriously considering turning this down because of your family?" Tyler asked, the disbelief evident in his voice. "The same family that made you work 3 jobs through college while paying your sister's full ride." "It's complicated," I said, though even to my own ears that sounded weak. "No, it's not," Tyler shot back. "It's actually very simple. This is your life, Dex, not theirs. When was the last time they considered your needs before making a decision?" That question hit me hard. I couldn't remember a single instance when my parents had prioritized my happiness or well-being over Amanda's. Not one. Over the next week, I threw myself into researching Madrid, the neighborhoods, the cost of living, the expat community, the tech industry there. I spoke with current Tech Fusion employees via video calls asking about their experiences. I consulted with a financial advisor about the implications of working abroad. Every piece of information I gathered pushed me closer to saying yes. The final interview with Tech Fusion sealed the deal. The team was brilliant and welcoming. The projects they described were exactly the kind of challenging work I'd been craving, and they made it clear they valued work-life balance, something my current company only paid lip service to. When the official offer came through, I accepted it within 24 hours. I would start in Madrid in 6 weeks. Telling my family was exactly as difficult as I'd anticipated. I called my parents on a Sunday afternoon, hoping to catch them in a good mood after church. "Madrid, Spain," my mother repeated as if I'd said I was moving to Mars. "But why would you want to leave Boston? Everything you need is here." "This is a fantastic career opportunity, Mom," I explained, trying to keep the defensive tone out of my voice. "It's a significant promotion and a chance to work with cutting-edge technology." "What about your house?" my father interjected. "You can't just abandon property, Dexter. That's irresponsible." "I'm figuring that out," I said, which was true. I was weighing my options between selling and renting. There was a pause, and I heard muffled voices as my parents covered the phone to discuss privately. When they returned, my mother's voice had that saccharine quality that always preceded an unreasonable request. "You know, this could actually work out perfectly," she said. "Amanda has been struggling to find affordable housing since the divorce. She could house sit for you while you're gone. It would help both of you." I should have expected this, but it still took me by surprise. "No, that's not going to work," I said firmly. "I'm either going to sell the house or rent it through a property management company." "But why pay strangers when family could help?" my father demanded. "Amanda would take good care of the place." The same Amanda who had never paid a bill on time in her life, who had called me 6 months ago because she didn't know how to reset a circuit breaker, who had never lived independently without her parents or husband managing the practical aspects of life. That Amanda. "I've already made my decision," I said, surprised by how steady my voice remained. "This isn't up for discussion." The conversation deteriorated from there, with my parents suggesting I was being selfish and unreasonable. When Amanda called later that evening to echo their sentiments and explain how perfect it would be for her to live in my house rent-free. I cut the conversation short and told her my decision was final. In the following days, I decided selling the house made the most sense. The Boston real estate market was hot, and I didn't want the hassle of being a landlord from overseas. I contacted a realtor who had helped a colleague sell his condo, and within days we had professional photos taken and the listing went live. To my surprise and relief, we received multiple offers within the first week, most above asking price. I accepted a clean offer with a quick closing timeline from a young couple who had been house hunting for months. They were flexible about the closing date, which aligned perfectly with my relocation plans. Throughout this process, I kept details vague when talking to my family. I told them I was handling the house situation and changed the subject whenever they pressed for specifics. I knew telling them I was selling would only create drama I didn't need while preparing for an international move. It wasn't dishonesty, I reasoned, just strategic information management. The weeks before my departure were a whirlwind of activity. I sold or donated furniture I wouldn't need, put important documents and sentimental items in storage, and worked with the closing attorney to ensure everything was in order for the sale. TechFusion arranged temporary housing for my first month in Madrid, giving me time to find a permanent place once I arrived. 2 weeks before my flight to Spain, I signed the closing documents and handed over the keys to the new owners, a milestone that felt both terrifying and liberating. The house that had represented my independence now represented my freedom to start a new chapter. I said nothing to my family about the sale. I simply told them I had resolved the house situation and was focused on my move. They seemed to assume I had worked out some arrangement with a property management company, and I didn't correct them. Maybe that was cowardly, but after years of family tension, I chose the path of least resistance. With my belongings either stored, shipped, or packed in the 2 suitcases I would take with me, I was ready for Madrid. I felt lighter than I had in years, unburdened by property, and temporarily at least the weight of family expectations. Stepping off the plane at Madrid Barajas Airport felt like entering another dimension. The air smelled different, the lights seemed brighter, and the rapid-fire Spanish announcements over the PA system made it clear I wasn't in Massachusetts anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely untethered from my past and the roles I'd been assigned by my family. The company had arranged for a driver to meet me at the airport. He held a sign with Senor Dexter Reynolds, written in bold letters, a small detail that made me smile. I wasn't just Dexter Amanda's less important brother, or the dutiful son who never quite measured up. Here I was, Senor Reynolds, the new senior developer from America, who had been specifically recruited for his expertise. My temporary apartment was in Chamberí, a residential neighborhood that balanced local authenticity with enough amenities to help an American adjust to Spanish life. The company had stocked the refrigerator with essentials and left a welcome basket with Spanish wine, olive oil, and a guidebook to Madrid. A handwritten note invited me to a team dinner the following evening. This level of thoughtfulness was foreign to me after years of feeling like an afterthought in my own family. That first night, jet-lagged but too excited to sleep, I sat on the small balcony overlooking the street. Below me, Madrid pulsed with life, even at 11 at night. People strolled unhurriedly, stopping to chat with neighbors. The sounds of laughter and conversation floated up to my perch. I sipped the welcome wine and felt something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Possibility. My first day at TechFusion exceeded my expectations. The office was in a renovated historic building with modern interiors, exposed brick walls alongside cutting-edge technology. My team consisted of developers from Spain, Germany, India, and Brazil, creating a rich mixture of perspectives and approaches to problem-solving. My manager, Elena, spent 2 hours introducing me to the team and outlining the projects I'd be working on. When she asked if I had any questions, I mentioned I was looking for a more permanent apartment. "We usually have lunch as a team on Fridays," she said. "But today is special because you're joining us. Everyone can give you advice about neighborhoods during lunch." That lunch lasted nearly 2 hours with animated debates about the best areas of Madrid for a single American in his 30s. Javier insisted that Malasaña was the only place to experience Madrid's true culture. Sofia countered that Salamanca would be more comfortable for someone still adjusting to Spanish life. Miguel suggested Retiro for its proximity to the famous park. No one rushed back to their desks, and Elena seemed to encourage the extended break. This was my first taste of the Spanish approach to work-life balance, productive intensity, during work hours but with space for connection and enjoyment. Over the next 2 weeks, I fell into a rhythm that felt both exciting and comforting. Mornings began with strong coffee at a cafe near my apartment, where the barista quickly learned my order and started preparing it when I walked in. Workdays were challenging but fulfilling with colleagues who valued collaboration over competition. Evenings and weekends became adventures in exploration, trying local restaurants, visiting museums, wandering through different neighborhoods to determine where I might want to live long-term. Miguel from my team invited me to dinner with his friends, a mix of locals and expats who welcomed me without hesitation. Sofia showed me her favorite hidden plaza where locals gathered on summer evenings. Javier insisted on teaching me essential Spanish phrases that weren't in any guidebook. These small kindnesses from relative strangers contrasted sharply with the constant judgment I'd felt from my own family. On my first Saturday in Madrid, I visited Retiro Park. The massive green space was filled with families, couples, and individuals all enjoying the perfect spring weather. I rented a rowboat on the small lake, something I would have felt self-conscious doing alone back home. As I lazily paddled around watching people picnic on the shores and street performers entertain crowds, I felt a profound sense of peace. My parents called via video that evening. I answered from my temporary apartment, genuinely excited to share my experiences with them despite our complicated relationship. "The apartment is so small," was my mother's first comment after I gave them a virtual tour, "and it looks old." "It's just temporary," I explained. "And it's actually in a historic building from the 1800s, which is why it has these amazing details." I pointed to the ornate molding on the ceiling. "Have you found a job yet?" my father asked, seemingly forgetting that I had moved for a specific position. "I already have a job, Dad. I moved here for it. I've been working at Tech Fusion for about 2 weeks now." "Well, how long do you think this phase will last?" my mother asked, her tone suggesting she was humoring a child's fleeting interest. "It's not a phase, Mom. It's a minimum 2-year contract, and if things go well, I might stay longer." The conversation continued in this vein, with my parents showing little interest in my new life, unless it related somehow to when I'd returned to Boston or how this affected Amanda. They didn't ask about my work, my colleagues, or my impressions of Madrid. When Amanda joined the call briefly, she immediately complained about a job interview that hadn't gone well, shifting the focus to her struggles. After hanging up, I sat on my balcony again, watching the lively street below. The contrast between my family's narrow focus and the expansive world I was discovering couldn't have been clearer. For the first time, I could see how their constant disapproval had shaped my self-perception. Here, 3,000 miles away, that fog was beginning to lift. The following weekend, I explored potential neighborhoods for a permanent apartment. Retiro had captured my heart with its proximity to the massive park, good transportation connections, and mix of traditional and modern elements. I contacted a rental agent who specialized in helping expatriates and arranged to see several apartments the following week. During a team lunch, I mentioned my plans to find a permanent place. "So you're really staying," Sophia said, not as a question but as an observation. "That's the plan," I replied. "I'm actually looking at apartments in Retiro." "Good choice," Javier approved. "Not too touristy but still central." "Will your family visit you here?" Elena asked casually. The question caught me off guard. The thought of my parents navigating Madrid's vibrant chaos, or Amanda complaining about the lack of American conveniences, seemed absurd. "I doubt it," I said honestly. "They're not big on international travel." "Then we will be your Madrid family," Elena declared, raising her glass in a toast that everyone joined. Family. The word had always carried such weight and complication for me, but here it was, being offered freely without conditions or comparisons. As I clinked my glass with my new colleagues, I realized I was beginning to envision a long-term future in Spain, not just professionally, but personally. A future where I could define myself on my own terms, not in relation to Amanda or my parents' expectations. That night, I video called Tyler to share my experiences. "You sound different," he said after I'd been talking for several minutes. "Different? How?" Lighter, happier, like you can finally breathe. I realized he was right. The geographic distance from my family had created emotional space I desperately needed. For the first time, I was living my life instead of reacting to their expectations and disappointments. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at the map of Madrid neighborhoods I'd been studying. Tomorrow, I would see more apartments, continue exploring my new city, and take another step toward making this new life permanent. The thought filled me with anticipation rather than anxiety. I was 3,000 miles and an ocean away from the weight of family history, and I was beginning to realize that was exactly where I needed to be. The call came on a Wednesday evening, exactly 17 days after I'd arrived in Madrid. I was sitting at an outdoor table at a small restaurant in Plaza Santa Ana, savoring a plate of patatas bravas and watching the sunset paint the buildings in golden light. The waiter had just brought a glass of local red wine when my phone lit up with Amanda's name. My first instinct was to ignore it. It was nearly midnight in Boston, and calls from Amanda rarely brought anything positive. But something, curiosity perhaps, or the lingering sense of family obligation, made me answer. "Hello? Dexter." "Oh my God, Dexter." Amanda's voice was high-pitched and breathless. In the background, I could hear other voices, at least two people speaking in tense tones. "Amanda, what's going on?" I took a sip of wine, already anticipating some manufactured crisis. "Why didn't you tell me you sold the house?" she demanded, her voice a mixture of panic and accusation. "I'm standing in your living room with the new owners right now, and they're threatening to call the police." The wine I'd just sipped nearly came back up. "You're what? Why are you in my old house?" "Mom and Dad gave me your spare keys. They said I could stay here while looking for an apartment. I've been moving my things in all day. And then these people showed up claiming they own the place." The pieces clicked together in my mind with nauseating clarity. My parents had somehow gotten hold of my spare keys, probably from the set I'd given them years ago for emergencies, and had given them to Amanda without even asking me. They had assumed I would keep the house vacant during my time in Madrid, despite my explicit statement that I wouldn't let Amanda stay there. "Amanda, I sold that house before I left for Spain. I told everyone I had handled the housing situation." "You never said you were selling it," she shrieked. "Why would you do that without telling us? Where am I supposed to live now?" I took a deep breath, keenly aware that the nearby diners were glancing at me with concern. "Amanda, please put me on speaker so I can talk to the owners." There was shuffling, and then a man's voice came through, tense but controlled. "This is Ryan Cooper. My wife and I bought this house 2 weeks ago. We came home from dinner to find a stranger in our house, claiming to be the owner's sister. Mr. Cooper, I am so sorry about this." I said, my cheeks burning with embarrassment despite being an ocean away. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I'm Dexter Reynolds, the previous owner. My sister was apparently given keys without my knowledge. I can assure you I had no idea this was happening. She's moved furniture into our guest bedroom," a woman's voice interjected, presumably Mrs. Cooper, "and she's rearranged our living room." "I thought it was still Dexter's house," Amanda protested in the background. "Mom and Dad said it would be fine." "I'll pay for any damages," I said quickly, "and I'll make sure my sister leaves immediately. Again, I am incredibly sorry for this invasion of your home." As I was speaking, another call beeped in my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, my parents are calling right now. Let me speak with them and sort this out. Can I call you back in 5 minutes?" I switched to my parents' call, moving away from my half-eaten dinner to find a quieter spot near the edge of the plaza. "Dexter, what on earth is going on?" My mother's voice carried that familiar note of disapproval. "Amanda just called us hysterical, saying you sold the house without telling anyone." "I did sell the house," I confirmed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I told you all that I had handled the housing situation before leaving. What I want to know is why you gave Amanda my keys without even asking me. We assumed you'd want to help your sister, my father cut in. She needed a place to stay, and you had an empty house. It was the logical solution. It wasn't your decision to make," I said, feeling my calm facade beginning to crack. "And the house wasn't empty. It belongs to a new family now. Amanda broke into their home." She used a key, my mother protested. That's hardly breaking in. A key she shouldn't have had to a house that isn't mine anymore. Dad, she could be arrested for this. There was a pause, and I could almost see them exchanging looks over the phone. You need to fix this, Dexter, my father finally said, his voice hardening. Buy the house back if you have to. Your sister needs a place to live. The absurdity of this demand momentarily left me speechless. When I found my voice again, it was surprisingly steady. I'm not buying back the house. Amanda needs to gather her things and leave the Coopers' home immediately. I'll arrange for a hotel for her tonight. This is so typical of you, my mother sighed dramatically. Always thinking of yourself first. If you had just told us you were selling. I am a 33-year-old adult, I interrupted. I don't need permission or approval to sell my own property. Now, I need to call the Coopers back and try to prevent them from pressing charges against Amanda. I ended the call before they could respond and immediately dialed the number Ryan Cooper had used to call me. When he answered, I could hear Amanda in the background still arguing with Mrs. Cooper. Mr. Cooper, I've spoken with my parents. I want to assure you that my sister will leave your home immediately. I'm arranging a hotel for her right now. She's refusing to leave, he replied, the frustration evident in his voice. She keeps saying she has nowhere else to go. Mr. Reynolds, I don't want to involve the police, but this is completely unacceptable. I understand. Can you put me on speaker, please? When he confirmed I was on speaker, I raised my voice slightly. Amanda, you need to leave the Cooper's house right now. I'm booking you a room at the Marriott downtown. I will pay for 3 nights, which should give you enough time to figure out your next steps. How could you do this to me? Dexter, Amanda's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine distress. You knew I needed a place to stay. I've already moved some of my stuff in. I explicitly told Mom and Dad that you couldn't stay at my house, I said firmly. I never gave permission for this. Now please apologize to the Coopers and leave their home. Where am I supposed to go? She demanded. I told you, I'm booking you a hotel right now. I'll text you the confirmation, but you need to leave the Coopers' house immediately before they have no choice but to call the police. There was a long pause filled with what sounded like muffled crying. Finally, Mrs. Cooper's voice came through. She's agreed to leave. We'll help her get her things into her car. Relief washed over me. Thank you for your patience, Mr. and Mrs. Cooper. I am truly sorry for this situation. Please let me know if there are any damages I can compensate you for. After ending the call, I quickly booked a hotel room online and forwarded the confirmation to Amanda. Then I returned to my table at the restaurant where my dinner had gone cold and my wineglass stood untouched. The waiter approached with concern. Is everything okay, sir? Is everything okay? No, I answered honestly. But it will be. As I settled my bill, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. I hope you're happy now. Mom and Dad are furious with you. I'm in the hotel but have nowhere to live because of you. I put the phone away without responding. The weight of family drama that I thought I'd left 3,000 miles behind had somehow reached across the Atlantic to find me. But for the first time, I wasn't going to apologize for setting boundaries or living my life on my own terms. The morning after the incident, I woke to a barrage of missed calls and text messages. My parents had called 7 times overnight. Amanda had sent a stream of increasingly accusatory texts. Even my aunt and uncle had weighed in, clearly having heard a one-sided version of events. I was scheduled to view apartments that afternoon, a step towards cementing my new life in Madrid, but the family crisis threatened to overshadow everything. Rather than let it simmer, I decided to address it head-on. I made a video call to my parents, knowing Amanda would likely be with them. They answered immediately. As expected, Amanda sat between them on their living room sofa, her eyes red and puffy from crying. My father's face was set in the stern expression I knew all too well from childhood, while my mother wore her martyred look of disappointment. Dexter James Reynolds, my father, began using my full name as if I were still a child. You have some explaining to do. Actually, I think you're the ones who need to explain. I countered, surprising myself with my directness. You gave Amanda keys to a house that wasn't mine anymore without even asking me first. You never told us you sold it, my mother exclaimed. How were we supposed to know? I told you I had handled the housing situation. I wasn't obligated to provide details of a private real estate transaction to anyone, including family. This is exactly the kind of selfish behavior we've come to expect from you, my father said, his voice rising. Your sister needed help during a difficult time, and you couldn't even keep your house for a few months to give her a place to stay. I offered to help Amanda in other ways, I reminded them. I updated her resume, connected her with job opportunities, even offered temporary housing while she looked for her own place. What I didn't offer was to keep a property I no longer needed so she could live rent-free indefinitely. It wouldn't have been indefinitely, Amanda interjected, her voice quavering. Just until I got back on my feet. And when would that be exactly? I asked. You've been getting back on your feet since your divorce 8 months ago. That's unfair, my mother protested. Amanda has been through a traumatic experience. So getting divorced means she's entitled to my house. A house I worked 3 jobs to save for, that I paid for entirely on my own without any help from any of you. We're your family, my father said, as if that single fact trumped all other considerations. Family helps family. Funny how that principle only seems to apply when Amanda needs something, I observed. Where was that family-first attitude when I was working overnight shifts to pay for college? An uncomfortable silence followed. Amanda broke it with a dramatic sob. I had already started moving my things in. I gave notice at my apartment because Mom and Dad said I could stay at your place. This was news to me. You gave notice at your apartment, without even confirming with me first. Mom and Dad said it would be fine, she sniffled. They said of course you'd want to help me. I looked at my parents, who at least had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. You told her she could move into my house without even asking me. We assumed you'd be keeping it, my father said defensively. It made no sense to sell a perfectly good house for a temporary job overseas. This isn't a temporary job, I said for what felt like the 100th time. This is a career move, potentially a permanent one. And even if it were temporary, the house was mine to sell. Well, you need to fix this, my mother declared. Amanda has nowhere to live now because of your impulsive decision. My decision to sell my own property wasn't impulsive, and Amanda has the same options anyone else would have. She can find an apartment, stay with friends, or continue living with you. Our house isn't set up for long-term guests, my father objected. Neither was mine, I pointed out. Yet you had no problem volunteering it. This conversation isn't productive, my mother interjected. The fact is, Amanda needs a place to live, and you're in a position to help. Can't you talk to the people who bought your house? Offer to buy it back? You're making good money at this new job, aren't you? The suggestion was so outlandish that I almost laughed. I'm not buying back the house. The Coopers are a young family who were thrilled to find their first home. I'm not going to upend their lives because you all made assumptions about my property. Then what do you suggest? My father demanded. I suggest Amanda take the hotel time I've paid for to find her own apartment. I suggest you both stop making promises on my behalf. And I suggest we all acknowledge that I'm an adult who gets to make his own decisions without family approval. Amanda burst into fresh tears. You've always been so selfish, Dexter. You know I can't afford an apartment in this market with my part-time job. Then get a full-time job, I said simply, like most adults have to do. How dare you, my mother gasped. Amanda has been through enough without your callous attitude. I'm not being callous, I'm being realistic. And honestly, I'm tired of being made to feel like the bad guy for having boundaries. My father leaned forward, his expression darkening. If this is how you treat family, perhaps you should reconsider what family means to you, Dexter. Your sister needs help, and you're turning your back on her from 3,000 miles away. I'm not turning my back on anyone. I've offered reasonable help. What I'm not offering is to upend my life and finances to solve a problem Amanda created for herself with your encouragement. Well, if that's your attitude, maybe we should reconsider our relationship, my father said coldly. I won't have a son who abandons his sister in her time of need. In the past, this threat would have devastated me, the ultimate parental disapproval I'd spent my life trying to avoid. But sitting in my Madrid apartment, looking at their angry faces on my screen, I realized something profound. Their disapproval no longer held power over me. If that's how you feel, I respect your decision, I said calmly. But I stand by mine. My mother looked shocked, clearly having expected me to cave under the threat of family estrangement. Amanda's tears stopped abruptly, as she realized her usual tactics weren't working. "You don't mean that?" my mother said uncertainly. "Family is everything, Dexter. Family should be supportive, not manipulative," I replied. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn approval that never came. I'm done with that now." "So you're choosing your fancy European life over your own sister," Amanda accused. "I'm choosing healthy boundaries over endless emotional manipulation," I corrected her. "And I'm choosing to live my life on my own terms, not as a supporting character in the Amanda show." "This discussion is over," my father declared, reaching for the end call button. "When you come to your senses and remember what family means, you can call us." The screen went black before I could respond. I sat in silence for a moment, waiting for the familiar wave of guilt and anxiety that usually followed confrontations with my family. Instead, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity and calm. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan Cooper. "Just wanted to let you know your sister has removed all her belongings from our house. No damage done. We understand this wasn't your fault." I thanked him for his understanding and apologized again for the intrusion. His gracious response stood in stark contrast to my family's reaction, despite the fact that he was the truly wronged party in this situation. As I prepared to meet the real estate agent for apartment viewings, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. The path of least resistance would be to call my parents back, apologize, and figure out some way to help Amanda, perhaps sending money for an apartment deposit or offering to pay part of her rent for a few months. It would smooth things over temporarily and restore the familiar if dysfunctional family dynamic. The other path was rockier and less certain. It meant maintaining the boundaries I'd established, accepting that my parents might actually follow through on their threat of estrangement, and building a life based on my own values rather than their expectations. As I locked my temporary apartment and headed out into the Madrid sunshine, I knew which path I was choosing. The aftermath of the confrontation with my family brought an eerie silence. For 3 days, no calls, no texts, no emails, a stark contrast to the barrage that had preceded it. In that silence, life in Madrid continued. I found an apartment I loved in Retiro, with large windows overlooking a tree-lined street and within walking distance of the park. I signed a 1-year lease with an option to renew another step toward making Madrid my home. On the 4th day, an email arrived from Amanda. The subject line read simply, "I'm sorry." I opened it with caution, half expecting another guilt trip packaged as an apology. "Dexter, I've had some time to think about what happened. While I still wish you had told us directly that you were selling the house, I understand that I shouldn't have assumed I could live there without your explicit permission. Mom and Dad encouraged me to believe it would be fine, but I should have checked with you directly. I'm sorry for the position I put you and the new owners in." The apology was more self-aware than I had expected from Amanda. She went on to explain that she had found a small apartment she could afford with her part-time job and some savings from her divorce settlement. Our parents were helping with the security deposit. The tone was civil, even somewhat mature, though she couldn't resist, adding that she hoped I wouldn't abandon the family completely, just because of this misunderstanding. I responded with equal civility, congratulating her on finding an apartment and assuring her that I wasn't abandoning anyone, merely establishing healthy boundaries. I concluded by expressing hope that we could move forward with a more balanced relationship based on mutual respect. Her reply came quickly. "I think I understand. I've been doing some thinking about how things have always been between us. I never realized how different our experiences were growing up. Maybe we can talk about it sometime." This unexpected opening surprised me. For the first time, Amanda seemed to be acknowledging the family dynamic that had shaped both our lives in such different ways. I agreed that a conversation might be valuable, suggesting we give it some time first to let tensions settle. My parents were less quick to reconcile. A week after the confrontation, my mother sent a text that managed to be both an olive branch and a guilt trip. "We miss hearing from you. Hope your job is going well. Amanda has found a little apartment, no thanks to your help, but she's managing. Call when you can." I chose to focus on the positive elements of the message, responding that I was glad to hear about Amanda's apartment, and that yes, the job was going extremely well. I attached a few photos of Madrid landmarks I'd visited, extending my own subtle olive branch, without apologizing for standing my ground. 2 days later, my father called. The conversation was strained but civil. He didn't mention our argument directly, focusing instead on neutral topics like the weather in Boston and a baseball game he'd attended. Near the end of the call, he cleared his throat in the way he always did before saying something difficult. "Your mother and I have been talking," he began. "We may have overreacted about the house situation. We should have asked you before telling Amanda she could stay there." Coming from my father, this qualified as a significant apology. I accepted it for what it was without pressing for more or offering unnecessary apologies of my own. "I appreciate that, Dad. I hope we can move forward with better communication." "That seems reasonable," he agreed, his tone suggesting this was as far as he was willing to go. "So tell me more about this Madrid job. Is it really something that could be permanent?" It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. Over the following weeks, communication with my family slowly resumed, though with a different quality than before. I was more direct about my boundaries, and they were somewhat grudgingly more respectful of them. Amanda and I had several conversations about our childhood and the family dynamics that had shaped us both. While she didn't fully acknowledge the preferential treatment she'd received, she did admit that our parents had created an unhealthy dependency in her that she was now struggling to overcome. Meanwhile, my life in Madrid flourished. I settled into my new apartment, decorating it with local art and furniture that reflected the city's blend of traditional and modern aesthetics. My Spanish improved from rudimentary to conversational, allowing me to navigate daily life with increasing confidence. At work, I took on leadership of a key project, earning recognition from senior management. The expat community I'd connected with became a kind of chosen family. Sunday brunches with Sophia and her boyfriend, weekend hiking trips with Javier and his friends, cultural events with colleagues. These relationships developed naturally without the weight of obligation or comparison that had characterized my family interactions. About a month after the house incident, I received an unexpected email from Ryan Cooper, the new owner of my former house. He attached photos of the renovations they'd completed on the kitchen, a project I'd always wanted to do but never found time for. "Thought you might like to see how the house is evolving," he wrote. "My wife and I wanted to thank you again for handling that awkward situation with your sister so promptly. We understand family complications and appreciated your professionalism. If you're ever back in Boston and want to see how we've made the place our own, you'd be welcome for dinner." This simple gesture of goodwill from someone who had every right to be angry touched me deeply. I thanked him for the photos and the invitation, promising to take them up on it if I found myself back in Boston. As spring turned to summer in Madrid, I realized I hadn't thought about my family's approval in weeks. The constant background anxiety that had accompanied me throughout my adult life. Am I doing enough? Will they finally be proud of me? Why can't they see my value had faded to near silence? In its place was a growing confidence in my own choices and values. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the Madrid skyline in gold and pink, my phone rang with my mother's number. I answered with a neutral hello, unsure what to expect. "Dexter," she began, her voice lacking its usual edge. "Your father and I have been talking, and we've decided we'd like to visit you in Madrid. If that's something you'd be open to, of course." The request caught me completely off guard. In all our years as adults, my parents had never expressed interest in visiting me, not when I bought my house, not when I received promotions, not for any milestone in my life. "You want to come to Madrid?" I repeated, buying time to process the request. "Yes," she said, sounding uncharacteristically uncertain. "We thought it might be nice to see this new life you've built. And to try to understand better." In that small hesitation, I heard something I'd rarely detected from my mother, an admission that there might be something she didn't fully understand, and a willingness to learn. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start. "I'd like that," I said honestly. "Madrid is beautiful in the fall. The tourist crowds are gone, and the weather is perfect." "Then we'll look at flights for September," she said, relief evident in her voice. "And Dexter, thank you." As I ended the call, I realized that standing my ground hadn't resulted in the family estrangement I'd feared all my life. Instead, it had created space for a potentially healthier relationship, one based on mutual respect, rather than obligation and comparison. I didn't harbor illusions that one visit would transform decades of family dynamics, but it was a step in a new direction. The Madrid sun dipped below the horizon, bathing my balcony in twilight. Below, neighbors gathered at sidewalk cafes, sharing meals and conversation. In this moment, 3,000 miles from where I began, I felt something I'd been chasing my entire life. The quiet certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be living, a life of my own choosing. 6 months have passed since that fateful evening when Amanda found herself in a stranger's house. 6 months of building a new life in Madrid, while negotiating a new relationship with my family from across an ocean. It hasn't been a straight line from chaos to resolution. Real life rarely works that way, but the journey has taught me lessons I never expected to learn at 33. Amanda found her footing more quickly than any of us anticipated. The small apartment she initially rented as an emergency measure has become a home she takes pride in. She got a full-time position as an administrative assistant at a local community college, her first sustained employment since before her marriage. We video chat every few weeks, and I've noticed a gradual shift in her demeanor. Less entitlement, more self-reliance. She recently mentioned she's started therapy to address her dependency patterns, a step I quietly celebrated. My parents visited Madrid in September as planned. The 4-day visit had tense moments, particularly when my mother compared everything unfavorably to Boston, but there were breakthroughs too. My father expressed genuine interest in my work, asking questions that showed he was truly listening to my explanations. My mother, after initially complaining about the strange food, found herself enchanted by a small family-run restaurant in my neighborhood, even requesting recipes from the owner's daughter who spoke some English. On their last evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on my balcony, my father cleared his throat in his characteristic way. "You seem settled here," he observed. "More so than you ever did back home." "I am," I confirmed. "Madrid suits me." "We didn't always make things easy for you growing up," he continued, surprising me with this acknowledgement. "Your mother and I had certain expectations, and when you and Amanda responded differently to them, you favored the response that was easier to understand," I finished for him. He nodded slowly. "It wasn't fair. We're beginning to see that now." It wasn't a complete apology or a full reckoning with the past, but from my father it was significant. When they left the next morning, our goodbyes held a warmth that had been absent from our relationship for years. The incident with the house keys became a turning point in more ways than one. It forced a confrontation that had been brewing for decades, lancing a wound that needed air to heal. The initial pain and chaos gave way to clearer boundaries and more honest communication. I no longer walk on eggshells around my family, and they no longer presume to make decisions on my behalf. My life in Madrid has exceeded all expectations. Tech Fusion promoted me to lead a new AI ethics initiative, a role that combines technical skills with the philosophical questions that have always fascinated me. I've become fluent enough in Spanish to navigate daily life with confidence, though I still stumble through complex conversations. My apartment in Retiro feels more like home than any place I've lived before. The friendships I've made here have deepened into something that feels like family chosen, family based on mutual respect and genuine connection, rather than obligation. Sophia and her boyfriend have become my regular Sunday brunch companions. Javier includes me in his close-knit group of friends who gather for hikes in the mountains north of Madrid. Elena and her husband have me over for dinner at least once a month, their children now greeting me with enthusiastic hugs. I started therapy myself, working through the lingering effects of growing up as the less favored child. The patterns established in childhood run deep, and untangling them takes time and patience. But with each session, I find myself more comfortable in my own skin, less driven by the need for approval I may never fully receive. Perhaps the most unexpected development came last month when I received an email from Ryan and Jessica Cooper, the couple who bought my house in Boston. They attached photos of a housewarming party they'd hosted, the renovated spaces filled with friends and family. "We wanted you to see how your house has become our home," Jessica wrote. "Every space holds new memories now." Instead of feeling nostalgic or regretful, I felt a profound sense of rightness. The house had served its purpose in my life, a stepping stone to independence, a symbol of my hard work and self-reliance. Now it was fulfilling its purpose for another family, providing the same sense of achievement and shelter I had once found there. Last week, Amanda called with news she'd been accepted to a paralegal certification program and was considering a career change. "I never thought I'd go back to school," she admitted. "But after everything that happened, I realized I need to build my own life, not wait for someone to provide it for me." "I'm proud of you," I told her, and meant it. The journey from that chaotic night to this moment of self-awareness couldn't have been easy for her either. "I had a good example," she said quietly, "even if I didn't always appreciate it at the time." As the sun sets over Madrid this evening, I find myself reflecting on the strange sequence of events that led me here. If my parents hadn't given Amanda those keys, if she hadn't entered a stranger's house thinking it was still mine, would I have found the courage to confront decades of family patterns? Would they have been forced to see me, really see me as an independent adult with the right to make my own choices? Sometimes the most painful moments become the most transformative. The key incident literally and figuratively unlocked a new phase of life for all of us. Amanda is finding her independence. My parents are reconsidering long-held assumptions, and I am building a life based on my own values rather than reactions to family expectations. I don't know if I'll stay in Madrid forever. The 2-year contract has another 18 months, and Tech Fusion has hinted they'd like me to consider a permanent position. What I do know is that wherever I go next, I'll be making the decision based on what's right for me, not out of obligation or fear or the endless quest for approval. The distance, both geographic and emotional, has given me perspective I couldn't find when I was enmeshed in family dynamics. From here, I can see my family more clearly with all their flaws and strengths. And perhaps more importantly, I can see myself more clearly too. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Has distance, physical or emotional, ever given you clarity about relationships that were too close to see clearly? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found value in my story, please hit like and subscribe to hear more about navigating family dynamics as an adult. If you know someone struggling with similar family patterns, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges makes them easier to face. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the keys we think open doors to our past actually unlock pathways to our future.